today's episode of Vice Versa, we're even closer to seeing the Semi in production. Tesla and Toyota are working together. April Fools? Texas lawmakers passing laws that favor fossil fuels. A company is turning sewage into hydrogen, and much, much more. And as usual, I'm joined by the guy who still refuses to give me his Netflix login, Ricky Roy. How you doing, Ricky?
Matt, on your birthday, your next birthday, I'll think about it. How about that?
Yeah.
By the way, is that a new haircut? Looking sharp.
Thanks. Thanks.
By the way, before we get started, I want to take a quick moment and say thanks to all of you guys for watching. We just broke past 5,000 subscribers, which is pretty awesome. And this is our 20th show. Pretty cool.
Yes. Congratulations to us and to all of you. Thank you so much for watching, everybody.
Really, we appreciate you guys.
So you want to jump into the first story?
What was your video this week, by the way?
My video this week. Yes, my video this week was I interviewed a friend of mine. His name's Steve Haynes. He added solar and batteries to his RV, and I talked to him about living on the road, off the grid. And it was a fun conversation, and I'm kind of jealous of him, but I don't know if I could do it myself. What about you?
I saw it come out, and I knew I had to bookmark it. I just watched it today. Yeah, it sounds like such an amazing thing to do. I think it might be tough with two, a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, but I do wish to do that one day. My video this week was on the question, why is Starship so big? It was a question we had been thinking about, so we decided to make a video about it. We really are proud of this one. We put a lot of work into it. So they'll be linked. Both of our videos will be linked in the description if you guys are interested. And with that, let's start the show. What do we got first?
Well, first up, we've got the Tesla Semi production. There's a new line just outside a Gigafactory in Nevada that they're going to be producing potentially 5 trucks per week. And this one just kind of broke just recently. It's not actually in the Gigafactory. They evidently kind of rented out a facility or bought out a facility on 550 Milan Drive, which is kind of adjacent. And they're building out a production line for the Tesla Semi there. And this is going to kind of be a pilot line that they can then replicate into Austin as they're building out the final line in Austin, Texas. So it's kind of exciting to see this. We've talked a lot about the Semi recently because there's been so much buzz and things happening around it. Like last week, we talked about how Pepsi's been talking about how they're going to have, I think it was 15 Tesla Semis, but by the end of the year. And this now kind of explains how they're getting it, because they're spinning up this line that's going to be spitting out about 5 of these every single week. Now, it's very low volume, but this gives them a chance to kind of kick the tires, proverbially, I guess, I don't know, or literally, maybe. But this is just, it's kind of exciting to see this coming to fruition so soon. And there's another aspect of this of, are they doing this to really kind of perfect their process, or are they doing this to try to make sure that they're the first company out the door producing electric semis? Because there are other companies kind of hot on their heels trying to come out with their own. So I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, I thought the timing of this was interesting because I really didn't expect to hear much about Semi, at least until Gig Austin was up and running. But yeah, I think what Tesla's doing is just reminding everybody, because you got to remember, like, some of these contracts go into place before the cars are ready to ship. Look at that thing. That is, of all the cool electric vehicle Semi options that we've seen, like Volvo has a new one now, there's like Lion, there's all these companies. This is still the best looking one. Look at that. That's a gorgeous Semi, which I don't think anyone's ever said those words before. And that shot of the interior, that is a reimagining. I don't know if you guys have seen like what the interior of a typical Semi looks like, but it ain't.
It's not that. It's definitely not that.
That looks very, very modern and sleek.
It's a spaceship.
Yeah, I think this is. Yeah, it is. Yeah, look at that. It looks like pretty much 2 little Model 3 screens on either side. But there's a whole suite of interconnectivity and stuff that they offer as well. But to me, this was kind of a shot across the bow to let people know, hey, remember us? Like we showed you our truck like years ago. We're not going anywhere, and we're gonna build 5 a week, and they're aiming for like 60 this year. But that's really all you need. They're not trying to go and sell a million of them, because I don't think their battery supply is fully flushed out. But they're clearly making cells from their Fremont line for the 4680. And I think you make 60 trucks, you start selling to the right people, and you get the same effect of like Rivian with UPS, right, or Amazon. You see these Rivian trucks out there, and people there's a little bit of a buzz and water cooler talk. So Tesla does that, and then suddenly Pepsi and all these companies start buying hundreds of orders of the Tesla Semi. So I think the marketing is brilliant. The timing is great. And this is, again, it's bizarre. Like, when have you ever cared about a semi before? Like, no one ever, right? I mean, I've never thought, the new Volvo is out. Oh my, so cool. Look, it has 20 cylinders. Like, I just never cared, but suddenly they're cool. Go Tesla.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't explain it.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. It's like
Something's
I've never cared about semi trucks, but suddenly I care deeply about semi trucks because this is super cool. I can't wait to see this on the road.
I'm wondering if there's going to be some, I feel like the pickup trucks keep getting bigger. Like, now you see guys like driving like F750s around, like going to like Petco to buy dog food. We'll see the first person driving around like a Tesla Semi.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, it's just my car, no big deal,
Yeah.
But it's good for the environment, electric.
Yep, I guess. All right, so
yeah,
next up.
that should be a fun one, and we'll keep an eye on it. Next up, we have a story so first of all, I think we typically don't cover stories at this stage of maturity. I think we like to hear a little more confirmation, but this is about Tesla and Toyota potentially working together. So the reason why we did include it is I actually think, even more than this report, that this might actually be happening. So the report comes from a Korean reporter, his name's here, and it says, it's reported that Tesla and Toyota have reviewed the partnership since last year and are approaching the final stage. It sounds promising, right? And they're considered jointly developing a small electric SUV platform. So the basic car skeleton, and then Toyota or Lexus could potentially put their own skin on it. So if this sounds crazy or a little bit like deja vu, well, that's because Toyota has actually done this before. Back, if you remember the Toyota RAV4 EV, that was the arrangement. Tesla provided, I think, the powertrain and batteries for that, and Toyota put it all together. So this is basically revisiting a previous engagement. So one thing that they mentioned is that the partnership ended in 2014. Pretty much it was a compliance car that Toyota was forced to sell. I think we've covered on this show intensely that Toyota seems to be very behind the times on this front. But what's interesting is they mentioned they sold all their shares of Tesla in 2017 and basically lost out on like 10x growth or 12 or 14x growth. So I'm sure they're kicking themselves on multiple fronts. But to me, this does make sense because Toyota's I don't think they're fully in a position to be all in, but I think they want to have an entry in the segment. I think they want to have some sort of a Lexus SUV, I think is my prediction. So this is the low code, the low investment way to get there. You don't really have to build factories or do any kind of R&D. You just go to the best and license the techs. And if they're only going to sell a couple thousand a year, I don't think the margins or any of that matters. It's just having an electric car when you go to a Lexus showroom. That's really what it comes down to. So I think this is actually going to happen. What do you think?
I don't. I really
No?
don't. Like, when this story came up, it's like I read it. I thought, is this an April Fool's joke? Kind of like the Volkswagen that happened a couple days ago. Which, by the way, is the worst pull-off of an April Fool's joke I've ever seen. It's like they released it several days before April Fool's, and then they let us know it was an April Fool's joke yesterday, wasn't it? It's like,
I actually think it wasn't, and they're hiding. They're like, oh, yeah, this was a joke when the backlash they got. I actually think they were doing it. I think it might have been serious. We might never know, but
this felt like that to me, of like, it felt just a little too far-fetched for me. Where it's like, really? Because the CEO of Toyota has said some horrible things about battery electric vehicles, and it's like, oh, now they're partnering with Tesla. This makes very little sense to me. And the fact that this report was only from one unnamed source, there's no corroboration to this. Yeah. It makes it very kind of unbelievable to me. So that's why I don't think that this is a real thing. But in the article, they did say part of the rumor is that it wasn't going to be supplying hardware technology in that sense, but software. So the software management systems and things like that, maybe full self-driving, who knows? It's like, but when it comes to batteries and drivetrains, I can't imagine Tesla would want to get into this when they're having trouble keeping up with their own demand and they're still ramping up their own factories. It's like, it doesn't seem like they would want to actually supply another company with stuff that they can use for themselves. But software, it's a completely different story. I could totally see them, supporting another company on that front. So in that regard, it kind of like piqued my interest of like, well, maybe, but I still don't think it's going to happen. I really don't.
just with how little Toyota's invested, to me, it felt like it could make sense, and that's why I thought it might be credible. To your point, though, about the batteries, yeah, I don't think if you're Tesla, you want to be giving away any batteries that you could be making cars with. But what if they kind of sold like the skateboard, the electric motors and the inverters and the controllers and all the BMS and, like you mentioned, the software, maybe even the UI for and infotainment, and it was kind of like batteries, like bring your own batteries. So you can, they'd have like a little tech, like a sheet maybe or something, and maybe even the pack, and you just supply your own 2170s or whatever they go with. That way they're not eating into their cell supply. Like you're still forced to go out, figure that out, but everything else is packaged. There's still huge value. Tesla's electric motors are really advanced. That there's people kind of think, oh, electric motors are way more simple than gas engines. And that's very much true, but there's still a lot of R&D that goes into it. We've kind of talked about in the past, like Lucid has some claims of really deep investment and efficiency improvements and stuff. So maybe, I don't know. I mean, compared to all the stuff we've been covering about Toyota, it kind of makes sense, don't you think? I mean, otherwise, what are you going to do? You're going to be caught with your pants down when everybody else has electric cars except for you. I don't know.
That's a compelling argument. I could see that, where maybe they are doing this because they're just, for them it's compliance. It's like they're just trying to keep up, and this would allow them to kind of somewhat keep up. So maybe.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Now, I'll tell you, they never fail to make it onto our board for some reason. They just,
I know, just week after week, it's just a head shake. Oh, Toyota. Well, next up, we're talking about, there's kind of two stories that are kind of very tightly related we're going to be talking about. And this one is Texas lawmakers are passing a bunch of laws that are just kind of head scratching at this point. So the beginning of the backlash has happened after the February energy disaster in Texas. It's like, when we talked about this before, it's like that's one of the things that made me nervous, which was this is going to become, a talking point in political circles of renewable energy. It caused all our problems when we actually know it didn't. The lack of weatherization of their grid is what caused the problem. Was not because it was renewables. But they just passed a law called HB 17, which prohibits cities and towns from passing bans on natural gas hookups in new construction. And this was kind of a reactive law because of things like what we're seeing in California, where they're banning gas lines in new construction, and they're making this is starting to become more popular in more kind of green states. And Texas was trying to kind of get ahead of that to prevent that from happening in Texas. So they passed this law that makes it against the law to pass a law like that or regulation like that. So regardless of how you feel about that, what's funny to me is that, what was it, Representative Joe, I can't say his last name, Deshotel, he addressed the Senate about this, saying that this was a great example of how to fix the problems that we saw in February. But the irony of that was that this bill was written in January. So it had nothing to do with what happened as a part of the February kind of disaster. So there's that raises into question. As part of this, there was also SB 3, which added a mandate for basically taxing of renewables in the state, so that to kind of pay for, what was it? On the surface, it seems like a good idea, but the purpose was to raise the cost of building out wind and solar. It's something that Republicans in the region have been arguing about for some time, was trying to get rid of the incentives and the rebates on wind and solar. But instead of doing that, what they've done is they've kind of levied these taxes on the wind and solar to make it more expensive, to make natural gas and coal and things like that look more appealing. So they're kind of coming at it from a different direction. Then there's another story, which I can pull up right now. This one, it's also very tightly related. This is related to what I was just talking about. The provision in these bills is to, part of the provisions in this bill was actually a good thing, which was to weatherize the energy production sources in the state to prevent what happened in the February event from ever happening again, which is great. But they're bringing a whole bunch of baggage along with it that is highly debatable. I'm really curious what you think of this, because these bills that have been passed or are about to be passed are very concerning to me. It's like there's pros and cons to all of it, but there's a lot of I don't know. I don't want to say big oil's part of this, but there seems to be money and investments in here that are kind of persuading certain senators to make choices that are not in the best interest of the state.
Yeah. So I think what makes this interesting or funny is it's coming out of Texas, which is a state, very famous for kind of being more about the individual, not so much big government and like deregulating. But that first story you mentioned, which is part of what would be enacted, is to make it illegal to not have natural gas hookups in new construction. So currently, a new construction, like if you're building a development of 100 homes, it's up to you. Do you want to pay the money to bring natural gas lines along with water and electricity and everything else, or do you not? So a lot of them are opting not to because increasingly, I guess, a lot of people are moving to electric heaters and electric stoves and ovens and things. So this law would make that illegal and require you to have a natural gas hookup, which okay, I actually don't mind the natural gas hookup. We mentioned this when we talked about the Texas disaster. I like the idea of having options. You never know. The power goes out. It's a cloudy day. My power wall and my solar is not generating. But if there's some backup system, that's never a bad thing. At the same time, this is Texas, the state about the free, and who give people like me in California, and actually you're from Massachusetts, same thing, a hard time about all this like overreach by the government. You're making it illegal to let people choose what they want to do when they build new homes, which bizarre. So even though I'm not opposed to the end result, what you're doing is wildly against what you always kind of say you stand for, which is a weird situation that they're in. And now we're talking about adding taxes and fees to solar and wind generation. This is like, when I was at Fully Charged Live, I was surprised to learn that Texas is really far ahead in terms of renewables. I actually never knew that. And the people at Fully Charged Live were super proud of that fact. So I'd love to hear if anybody in the audience is from Texas, like how they must feel about this. Like, talk about 2 steps backward at some point. So
Yeah.
disappointed to hear, and it'll be interesting to see how the concrete results of this will be, because at this point it feels speculative and stuff. I'm not sure exactly how it'll land, but
Yeah, it feels
kind
like
of a shame.
it feels like there's 2 sides to Texas. It's like they are one of the leaders of wind production in the country, and yet they're doing this. It's like shooting
Right.
yourself in the foot. It's like what are you doing? It's like you're leading the way on this. There's a transition happening, and you were at you were leading the pack. And it's like this is just going to set them back, which is just, I don't know. It sends me spinning whenever I think about this. It's just so shocking to me. But at least
Yeah.
they are going to weatherize their grid, which will prevent the February event from ever happening again if they pull it off. Because that was ultimately what went wrong. It was not the fact it was renewables. And the natural gas lines, they froze. So it's like, it's not going to, natural gas lines is not the solution. It's the weatherization that's the actual solution to solve the problem that caused people to die and, lose all their property from, flooding that happened from burst pipes. It's like, address the actual issues. Let's not turn this
Right.
into a political witch hunt for whatever money you're taking behind the scenes. It's very frustrating.
There's actually even more complication to it, to your point, which was, I remember reading, I think it was this article or another one that we were reading, that in the event that there was like an emergency situation where they had to kick on all the natural gas plants because there was other issues in the grid, they would actually be metering the natural gas going to individual homes, because like if the power is out, everybody has the same idea. I have a natural gas fireplace, for example. I'm going to light that up and light all my natural gas fireplaces. Well, you'd be using up all the natural gas, and there might be a shortage at the power plants that where it's needed, especially if everyone flicks it on. Same as electricity, right? If everyone goes and the demand spikes, well, you're going to have pressure losses and a shortage of natural gas. So there's a chance that even if you had natural gas running to your house, they might be able to control that flow if there was an emergency situation. There's also some provisions about billing. I think
Yes.
they mentioned that like the emergency response billing rate could only apply for 12 hours if there was like a declared emergency. Because again, deregulation sounds great until you get a
Yeah.
$7,000 bill for electricity. So this would limit that absorbent price hikes and
It was the
peak usage.
wholesale. It was the wholesale electric indexes
Yes.
that they're
Yes.
limiting, because
They're
part of the
limiting,
benefits
yeah.
of deregulation was your electricity gets dirt cheap because you're going off these wholesale prices. But the problem with that is when you have something like this happens and there's this
Right.
electricity spike, suddenly it's like thousands of dollars for, a few kilowatts to your house, and you get a bill for $4,000, which was what was happening to people. So
Right.
that, like I said, there's some good things in the bill that are fixing some of these issues, but there's a lot of baggage that comes with it.
Well said.
So you want to go to the next one?
Yeah. The next one is it's maybe still stinky and dirty, but a lot more optimistic, I think, overall. This is a story that I read this week, and I thought it was super cool. And it ties into this idea that I have that I'd like to see investment everywhere. So this new facility in Tokyo will convert sewage. It's at a sewage treatment plant. That's its main purpose. But it can actually convert the sewage into renewable hydrogen. And, it's not going to be in a huge scale. It'll be like 40 kilograms a day, sort of a collection, 40 to 50 kilograms a day. But that's enough to fuel like 10 passenger vehicles. And again, this is hydrogen that would just otherwise be emitted as carbon dioxide. So this is carbon negative, this whole process. Because this is a carbon capture technology plus hydrogen generation technology. So talk about a win-win. They mentioned in this article that I think it's 90% or some really high number of all the hydrogen that we generate today actually comes from like natural gas reforming, like really dirty fossil fuel based approaches, which is bizarre, but that's just the way it is. Electrolysis is a very expensive procedure, and by the time you collect the hydrogen, you liquefy it, and you compress it, and you store it in a tank, it just, like 60% of the energy is gone from like solar or however you collected it. But this could be interesting, and this is why I have never written off hydrogen. Japan, the entire country of Japan is huge on hydrogen. I never fully understood why, and I still don't. I don't think there's any future for like passenger cars, like you and I, the cars that we drive every day. But like huge, hauling or like, yachts and boats and
Trains.
freighters and stuff. Trains are good. Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good example. Maybe electric for trains if you could have like electric, like power just piped right into it. But there's applications for it. So to my mind, I think this story was fascinating because this is exactly what I had in mind when I mentioned I want to see investment in hydrogen. I don't want to just like there's a sense that Elon says hydrogen is dumb and we should stop investing in it. I do think it's dumb for cars, but what if we could come up with new novel ways? What if every sewage plant? What if every place where this sort of natural processes that end waste could be recycled in this way? And by the way, that entire factory runs on its own electricity, so it's even like power neutral. Really, really exciting stuff. So there's future ways that we can harness hydrogen that solve the money problem that we have currently with it. And I think when we have enough of those in place, it could make sense for large-scale storage. Imagine like massive hydrogen storage facilities where we store excess energy from the sun and then we have it for the nighttime.
Yeah. It's like you and I are on the same page with hydrogen. It's like I have not written it off at all. I think there's a lot of potential there, just not in passenger cars. I think it's a joke for passenger cars, but there's a lot of great uses for it. And what's funny is I'm actually working on a green hydrogen video right now. So it's like I've been doing a whole bunch of research around this. And so when you put this in this, I hadn't seen this story. When you put it in there, I was like, this is weird timing. This is not going to be a shock to anybody if you watch my videos, but I always go back to the LCOE, which is the levelized cost of energy. So when I read this story, my first thought was, what's the LCOE on this? Because it's crazy cool technology, but if it can't do it in a profitable way and be competitive with other forms of hydrogen generation, it's going to go nowhere. So this will be the only plant we ever hear of that does this. I hope it's effective for its cost. It is cool that it's generating its own electricity that it can use to kind of be like a closed loop system is basically what it is. But my curiosity was, okay, it's producing this hydrogen, but what's the cost of that hydrogen? Because gray hydrogen, which is what's made with fossil fuels today, costs, I think it's about $1.50 per kilogram. And green hydrogen is like about $2.50 at best case scenario. So my question was, is this $2.50 or is this closer to $1.50? It's like, where does this fall in that realm? Or is it $5? Is it some kind of crazy, just way too expensive process? So it's like, while I loved the whole aspect of what they were doing with the technology, I had so many questions about the costs and the effectiveness of it.
I think the cost will be hard to pin because it's kind of a byproduct of what they're doing at that
Yeah.
plant. It does there's not like much opportunity cost there. But the problem will be yield. Like they're not going to make enough of this. Like they mentioned,
It's very
50
small.
kilograms a day at this. It's very small. So
Yeah.
for that reason, I mean, if you're going to commercialize it at that point, it probably just makes more sense to like store it locally, and you've got
Good
power.
point.
You can run it from a fuel cell, and you have power for later. At such low volumes, I don't know that it actually would make sense to sell it. But what if we had larger scale plants? You know, I don't know. It's a good question. It's a very good question.
It's
And it
clever.
is the right
'Cause-
way to think about this.
yeah. It's like we have to handle this stuff in one way or another. It's kind of like when I did a video on Stirling engines, it's about how you have a factory that has a process that's putting off a ton of heat. Well, capture that heat and use that heat as an energy source for something else. It's using all the different parts of the system to try to be most effective. And that's what's clever about this. It's you're getting rid of this garbage. Well, can we get something good out of it? It's like, okay, we're getting rid of garbage and we're getting hydrogen at the same time. So it's very clever. I like the way,
That's
I like the
what
way
I
they're
love about
thinking. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, so next up, and this is our last story. This one's an interesting one. This is all about how the pandemic has affected parking lots of all things, and what what they're doing that's really cool and clever from this. And I don't know if is this out by you, Ricky? The LAS parking lots, are those in your area at all?
You know, when I was traveling more for work, I think I've been like 5 or 10 of them around the country. I think there are some in LA. Yeah.
Yeah, because they're all over. They're all over here. They're all over New York City. I see them. I used to park in a LAS parking lot when I worked in Boston. But what's fascinating about this story is that they're Alan Lazowski, who's the CEO of LAS Parking. They noticed that with the pandemic, there was 95% drop in the parking in their lots, obviously, because we went into lockdowns. So they had to basically furlough half of his employees. They have these empty spaces that aren't getting used. And being this very clever businessman, he decided what he's going to do is kind of rethink what a parking garage could be. And so what they're doing while this is happening is they're going to be adding 50,000 chargers, EV chargers, to all of their like different parking garages around the country. Because as he described it, the parking garages are going to become the future gas stations, which is such a wonderful way to think about it. Because it's like everybody's parking, they're going to want to charge up, which brings me back to my experience at one of his parking lots in Boston. They're in massive parking garage, and there was 4 EV chargers. And every time I would go in there, they were always full. I never got to use them because they were always full. And the idea that they're going to be adding more is fantastic. But the other thing that they're doing that I thought was super clever was they're going to be like using 5,000 to 10,000 square feet for these like little micro warehouses in their parking garages, which will be used as kind of packing and last mile delivery services for, you know, stuff we're shopping for. And they could partner with things like, you know, Uber and, you know, whatever the delivery services that are using it are. So you've got 1.3 million parking spaces across 420 cities where he's going to be able to take advantage of this real estate for these very clever new uses that could make things more effective and as well as become very central to EV charging infrastructure. Being able to charge up your car while you're at work or you're shopping when you're using one of his parking lots. It's very cool.
Very cool. And a special shout out to Eric Burendorf, who recommended this story. It was one of our viewers who shared this with me, and we put it on the board. So when we tell you guys to, you know, let us know what you guys want us to cover,
Yeah.
we mean it. We'll definitely we'll do that. So thank you, Eric, for that. So if you show my screen, there's a picture near the bottom of that article where they kind of break this down. I don't know if you guys can read that very well, but talk about like re-imaging or reimagining every part of a parking structure. So
Yeah.
they're talking about like potential, and this is all, you know, I don't think they've actually done this yet, but urban farming. Imagine having little areas on the top of the roof where you have solar, and you can even have like urban farms, last mile delivery, pickup and drop locations. That's really interesting, right? Imagine a world where we got drones flying around. What better place than some, you know, commercial area like a parking lot where you could operate and not really be bothering too many people. And also generally just innovating around like a touchless experience, which I think you're going to hear those words a lot more often. You know, talking about like, you know, when you buy a car now, it's a touchless delivery experience. Yeah, that's kind of the way things are headed.
Yep.
Frictionless access. So imagine from every part from when you roll in and roll out, you're on your phone increasingly maybe, or you're just you're in an environment where you don't have to interact with people, which kind of sounds a little bit sad, but I think if the pandemic has taught us anything, we need to be flexible. And if travel does halt again, how could you use the spaces that you have? To me, this was just one of those stories that I love hearing about entrepreneurs who just won't quit. Like even if you told me that 95% of my views on my YouTube channel are gonna be are gonna disappear next month, that would be pretty tough to to recover from. But here's a guy who just keeps reimagining and thinking about what kind of stuff he could do to improve upon his position and with his assets that he has, knowing that eventually we'll go back to flying, but when we do, it'll even be better than it was before. So this is one of those stories that I love hearing about, that people got better, or we learned, or we did better things after the pandemic. It's good. It's a feel-good story.
Yeah,
after all that sewage. That was also
Awesome.
a feel-good story. That was a good one too.
Yeah. Well, that was our last story for the evening. So now we're going to transition to our usual Q&A section, have a chat with everybody, hang out. So sound off in the comments.
And also, we have 30 minutes and we only have 70 likes. That's dangerously low. If I might be so bold. So let's see if we can get a
Dangerously low.
The quality of our answers improves exponentially with the number of likes. That's a fact. So there's something in it for you guys as well.
There we go. Hit those like buttons.
Yeah, I think hydrogen is a topic of interest for people. There's a lot of allure to hydrogen. It's just like magically the most abundant thing on Earth. When you talk about, our fuel is the most abundant element in the universe. There's something nice about that. But yeah, it has its own challenges, and we'll see. I think the future, there might be some breakthroughs in hydrogen that will make us happy.
Yeah, I think it's kind of inevitable that we'll make it work in a clean way. I have no doubt about that.
There's a question I actually would like you to answer. Thank you, Eric, for being just awesome. He's a huge supporter of all of our channels and everything else. Thank you, Eric, for your super chat. There's a question from Dirk, who says, any comments on the infrastructure plan? I'm really curious to see what you think about that.
Oh, Biden's infrastructure plan?
Yeah.
I'm cautiously optimistic. I have a feeling it's not going to all come through. But like the EV incentives and what he wants to do for EVs is, I think, a fantastic step forward. We definitely need our infrastructure for like the bridges and the roads that he's proposing fixing. I don't know about where you live, but there are so many bridges around here that you kind of question, is this bridge even safe? Because it doesn't look like it's been serviced in, 40, 50 years. So it's like, we definitely need that, and it's going to create work for a lot of people. So it's like, I'm very excited about what they're proposing, but it could actually go way further. It could go way, way, way further.
Yeah, I agree. So there's a question, I wanted to pull up a picture. There's a question that also I'd like you to field, is which do you think will be more successful this year, the Kia EV6 or the Ioniq 5? There's sure a lot of underpinnings. I always forget the direction, but I believe Hyundai is a major shareholder of Kia.
Yeah.
They are independent companies, but there's a lot of overlap there. They share tons of stuff. So the cars are very similar, but I actually like the EV6 a lot. I think it's a pretty cool looking car. What do you think?
I like the EV6 a lot, but I think I'm more partial to the Ioniq 5 personally.
Yeah, I thought. Yeah.
It's a little more my taste.
I think it's going to be a cool car as well. Alan McDonald, thank you so much for your super chat. Alan says, love the show. You guys have a great product. We appreciate you, man. Really, this is one of those things I look forward to each week. So thank you guys so much for that. Thank you, Alan.
Yeah, thank you very much.
It sounds like Eric Burndorf and Rodney say New England needs a lot of love for its roads and bridges.
Yeah.
I think California is the same thing. I wanted to bring this up when we were talking about one of the stories earlier. We were talking about, you mentioned that we're going to that Texas is going to weatherize their infrastructure. Well, they're supposed to have to want to, but will they? Is always one of those funny points because. Thank you, Romeo, so much for your super chat.
Oh, wow.
Very
Thank you
generous
so
of
much,
you.
Romeo. It's very generous.
I don't think I've seen Romeo before, so I think if you're a new viewer, man, thank you so much and welcome. We hope to see you around for a long time. In California, there was, I think I've mentioned this on the show before, actually, but 5 or 6 years ago, we had a ballot initiative to raise the gasoline taxes. And California's gasoline taxes are the highest, I think. I think we have you guys in New York beat as well, but you guys are like probably 2 and 3 in Massachusetts and New York. But there's a new initiative. We're going to raise taxes on gasoline by 10 cents or something like that, and we're going to use that to fund road repairs, and we're going to improve our roads, right? And I remember, okay, that one passed, okay. And then 2 or 3 years later, there was another ballot initiative, and I'm not making this up. And the ballot initiative is actually force the government to use the money raised from the road tax to improve our roads. What the hell have you guys been using that money for 3 years? And this is invariably the part that always drives me nuts is this is supposed to happen. You're supposed to weatherize. Will they? I wish I was more optimistic, but let's hope they do. But I don't know. Until I see it.
Yeah. That's ridiculous that you have to say, please use the road money for the roads.
Yeah, remember that money we took from you? How about you actually use it to fix our roads? Because our roads are terrible in California. So you guys have weather. I get that your roads, ice freezes and melts, and there's a lot of. This is California. This is San Diego. There's no easier place. We get no rain. It's never cold. Why are our roads not like pristine? Anyway, it drives me crazy.
Jeremy Johnson asked an interesting question. Do you think having the ability to use an EV as backup power could prevent this in the future for what happened in Texas? What do you think?
100%. I'm a huge proponent of vehicle to grid for this reason. If you're going to use your precious, very high energy density batteries in your car for running your house, that might not be the best because you're probably going to degrade the battery sooner than you would driving it. So I don't think it would be like I would plug it in all the time and use it. But if you needed it and you have a 75 kilowatt hour battery pack or 100 kilowatt hour battery pack sitting in your garage, why not plug it in? And if there's a critical mass, I'm making up a number, 10 or 15% of all cars were EVs, and everyone did this when the Texas power went out, it might have been able to recover from that. There's a chance that you can power your neighborhood, at least your own house, and if you couple that with like a virtual power plant and things like AutoBidder and stuff, I absolutely think you could do it.
It would take a significant amount, though. You'd have to hit a I don't know what that percentage would be, but yes, at a certain point, it would absolutely help.
Ion Ghosh asks, and Ion is awesome. I think he's in our Discord as well, so thank you, Ion, for being a viewer. He says, could a home battery be unclipped and used as a range extender for an electric vehicle? It's a great question.
Could a home battery be unclipped?
So I can imagine like take your power wall, like slap it off the wall and throw it in your car and get more range.
No.
So the problem you're going to have is like these stock cars are not going to be able to charge while you drive. So you can have a power wall in your trunk. That's great. And then when you stop the car, you could run the power wall into an inverter to an outlet and then take a charging cable and stick it into your charge port and charge while you're parked. Technically, you could maybe go to an electrician, like a rogue electrician.
Yeah, it would have to be a rogue electrician.
I'm picturing the guy that George Costanza goes to in Seinfeld for the Froggery game.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
But you could have somebody rig it up so that you could do that while you're driving. But, I mean, it's possible, not without, like, massive changes to your car, modifying it.
There's also the question of weight, because you'd be lugging around. Seriously, the power wall is heavy. It's like that's going to add.
It's bigger than people realize too.
Yeah, it's really heavy.
James Stahl says, Thank you for your super chat, James. Really appreciate you. He says, thanks, guys. Love your optimism. Yeah. I don't know where the source for you is, but for us, it was when we had our two kids. I remember we were like laying in bed watching like Vice. If you're ever in a bad mood, don't watch Vice. They cover the most depressing topics. But my wife and I were like, what are we doing? We're pregnant with our first kid. Like, what kind of a world is this? But, I started to realize there's so much cool stuff, like that sewage treatment plant story. I know it sounds silly, but
Yep.
there are smart people doing cool things, and there's so much resources and there's so much access to like private capital. If you have a cool idea as an entrepreneur, I'm crazy optimistic. I think the future is going to be awesome. I really do.
Yeah, part of the reason I do the videos that I do on my channel is because like I'm in awe of what we're capable of doing when we put our minds to it. We can do literally anything we want. It's like we can send people to the moon using the power of a glorified calculator. You know what I
Right.
mean? It's like we can do anything if we put our minds to it. We just have to
Yeah.
do it. And it's so exciting to see the innovations and the things that people are coming up with to solve problems we have every day. So cool.
Very well said. So, unnamed man says, do you think the US $25,000 Tesla is just a Model 3 with lithium iron phosphate batteries? We didn't seem to like actual smart cars here. That is a great question. I actually think the $25,000 Teslas, from what I've kind of read and stuff, is designed by the engineering teams in Tesla China. And that'll be a car that is actually shipped around the world, which will be crazy because we don't have any Chinese cars that we import currently to the US. So this would be kind of a cool take with the lower cost of labor, lower cost of materials, assembly, square footage, space, everything. Potentially that helps drive the cost down. And secondly, it'll be the form factor of the car. I don't. I think it'll be a new model, and this might be like unpopular, but I almost for the reasons he mentions, which is a compact car just doesn't sell well here. I wouldn't be surprised if the $25,000 Tesla is kind of like Asia and Europe focused and not really North
Yes.
America.
Yes. I think that's going to end up being the case. It's like they may have it here in small amounts, but I don't think it's going to be a big seller at all. It's like a lot of these compact cars that you see, like if you look at the EVs that are available in Europe, there are far more available in Europe,
True.
way more than here. And part of that is because a lot of them are just these small, compact little cars that would just never sell here. So they don't even try.
Yeah, and there's some really cool ones. Like I was always a fan of like the Golf GTIs and GTRs, but there's maybe a little bit of room for sales there, but they cannot compete with the crossover SUV segment. So that's kind of the nature of it. Dusty, who's one of our viewers and patrons, says, "Funny having my kids made me less optimistic and more protective." I can see that. I can see that too. Do you have James says, who's going to be the first to buy a Cybertruck? You have a reservation? I forget now.
I do have a reservation.
You do. You'll need to buy a new garage though by the time you have your Cybertruck and your Roadster. It's a good problem to have, but I'm just saying, you know.
My wife and I are actually looking right now at moving.
Okay.
And depending on where we move, one of the places we're looking at, I really, really would want a truck. So it's like, I've been on the fence of, am I going to get the Cybertruck or not? It's like, if I was staying where I am right now, I probably wouldn't keep my reservation. But if we end up moving where I think we might be moving, I might actually get it.
That's awesome. Maybe a little more, like further away from the city, maybe.
Yeah, it's out into
Yeah.
Western Massachusetts. So literally
Definitely.
out in the mountains, just like, not in the middle of nowhere, but close to it.
We have a similar idea as well. Um, Aptera Reboot says thoughts on the SN11 Fog launch. I didn't. It's just funny because my video this week was on Starship. I didn't really follow too much about SN11, but I've been watching. I watched 9 and 10 pretty closely, so I think that one was scrapped just for weather visibility and things like that. that's going to happen. And I remember reading an article recently that says like, why is Starship crashing? And like non-engineers don't understand that their goal, they weren't like, Elon isn't like cursing and yelling at his engineers for failing. You got to go fail. You got to go put these things through the paces. The Raptor engine, which I learned a lot about in this last video, isn't perfectly finished yet. They're still improving it. And I think they're actually expecting it to be like 20 or 30% better in terms of like specific output and some other factors by the time they are ready for it. So the road is long and you got to crack a couple of eggs to get there. So there's nothing bad about any of it. And I can't wait to see further launches.
It drives me nuts, some of the press coverage, like when it's like it exploded again. And it was like it failed again. They used the word failed. And it was like, failed by what definition? It's like what they were testing to do, they got the data they needed. So it's like, was it a failure?
I know.
I don't think it was.
I'm starting to get really irritated by how some of the media, and I'm not like throwing a broad blanket, but some of the media covers this stuff. It's really negative, and if you don't have the full context, it can totally picture your opinion of it, and it's not fair.
I'm loving James Paul said, Matt is building a secret lair with underground parking for multiple Teslas. It'll have my Cybertruck, my Model 3, and the Roadster eventually.
Yeah. I think James is onto you. He knows your secret plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a Dan and Jason are saying, the only way to advance fast is to fail fast. Yeah, that's definitely like a Silicon Valleyism, like fail faster.
Yep.
And it really, it's something that we talk about on our channels. If you have a video that you thought was going to do well and it doesn't, don't get caught up on it. Just keep moving. Like figure out some small incremental changes or improvements and keep going. It's a very important lesson to learn, especially when you're trying to be ambitious like this. There was a question we've talked about. Maybe you could take this one. So Peter Young asked, "What's your view of full self-driving, reality or fiction?"
Meaning, will it ever happen?
Yeah.
Full self-driving will happen. It's just when. That's kind of where I sit.
Yeah, I think you and I are maybe a little bit longer. We're thinking a little bit longer. Dan Crow says it'll be here by year's end or early 2022. Well, we've mentioned this before. FSD is it's just a marketing term. It doesn't mean anything. Full self-driving is just a Tesla term. So they can say that, will they have full self-driving mission accomplished by the end of the year? Maybe. But that's not like level 5 autonomy, which is what I'm thinking more about.
Yeah,
I'm thinking about a car that drives itself. And so we might both be right. Dan's saying FSD by the end of the year, and level 5 autonomy is probably several years away.
Yeah, it's going to be feature complete in the next year or so. I have no doubt about that. But feature complete is not level 5 autonomy. There's still a lot of ways to go before we get to the point where it's a true level 5. Regulations all approve it. It's reliable in every situation. When you hit that button and go driving around, you could actually remove the steering wheel, that kind of level. We're still years away from that.
Darian, also a long-term viewer. I think Darian was on the first stream we ever did of the show. He says, me and my boyfriend can't wait to get our refresh Model S. I don't blame you. So did you, I guess it then has, well, no, there's the long range, the Plaid and Plaid Plus, and they all get the refresh.
Yep.
So I'm curious, Darian, which model you got. Matt, you might have to throw in a Plaid Plus into your garage. Because the Cybertruck, it's kind of big. The Roadster is kind of small, but you need to go fast and you need to take like a couple of people. So just factor it into your underground lair.
I'm going to need to make a lot more YouTube money to be able to afford that.
Get to work.
Congrats, Jason, on getting your solar and Powerwall. Hope it gets there quickly.
So Observer had asked a little bit earlier on, says, what do you think about the dairy farms that power electric generators with manure methane digesters? So this is kind of in the same vein as the sewer story that we covered, which is methane is a horrible greenhouse gas. By the way, it's like I think it's like 25 times more potent than CO2. CO2 actually gets a kind of a bad rap, but there's much worse things than CO2. But methane is really bad, and we know that farm animals are notorious methane emitters. So again, these kinds of unique approaches to the problem, and it's wildly carbon negative because you're taking something that would have been horrible for the environment and now actually using it to produce electricity. So I want to go, if anybody knows of someone who does that sort of a thing, the methane collection, I want to go to that farm and I want to see that process. Like, what I'm picturing in my head is probably not how they do it. I just want to see it like happen. So anybody has that hookup.
The image you just put in my head. Thank you very much for that. That's all I can say.
I figured.
Oh my God.
I figured, but
why would you do that?
I would love to see how that works because it's pretty fascinating.
Everybody's talking about the Matt Cave.
I love that term, dude. You need to get that. You got to have T-shirts made for that. Yeah. We'll work up some designs and make a vice versa version. But yeah, the Matt Cave.
Eric said the mountains of North Adams have space to hide your toy cave. I'll have to look at North Adams.
There you go.
And I agree with Observer. The Roadster should be able to park in the back of the Cybertruck. That would make it the winning combination.
So you got this like Fabergé egg of EVs. But he also mentions before that, Observer does, that to press that like button, which sage advice, I think. Very wise man.
Damn. Go eat Chili's for a week, and then you can do the whole methane gas thing at home.
I might try that. My wife might not be as fond, but yeah, I think with a little bit of a heads up, we could work something out.
And Dirk suggests coming to South Africa.
Yeah, Dirk is another one of my patrons on my Discord, and that sounds amazing. I am so ready to travel. I don't know about you. I've got a couple of trips coming up. I'm dying to travel. South Africa sounds amazing. My parents travel a lot. South Africa was one of the places my dad said was one of the most beautiful places he's ever been.
I am so ready to travel. I need to get out of my house.
No kidding. A lot of methane capture jokes, I figured. We opened up that can of worms. Darian mentions that he got the Plaid Plus Model S, that is a incredible car. I wish I had one. I wish I was getting one. Rodney Jackson, this is a good one. I actually haven't had a chance to dig into this more. Rodney Jackson says, what do you think are the drivers for the large increase on Tesla solar roof prices? So there was an article, I think, that came out. That we might have put that on the board.
I have a theory.
For this. Do you have a theory? Let's hear it.
Yeah. I've interviewed Eric Weddle from Weddle & Sons Roofing, who actually installed these. And in the conversation, I didn't put it in my video, but we talked a lot about the pricing and the difficulties around how he has his company prices it versus what Tesla does. And one of the disconnects was that the price quote system on Tesla's website didn't take everything into account. You'd plug in your address, it would look at a satellite photo and spit out a quote. and the cost of the roof changes dramatically the more complex your roof gets. The more edges and like angles of your roof, it gets much more expensive, like drastically more expensive. I think the majority of this price increase is not a price increase for the sake of a price increase. I think all they really did was they changed their price quote system to be more accurate because they've installed a lot more of these roofs now and they've seen how far off their estimates have gotten. Because I've also heard from people that have said their price quotes were much higher than the initial quotes they got through the system on the website. So I think all they did was change that price quote system so it's being more accurate up front, because as part of the new system, they give you the option of simple, like moderate or complex for like what your roof is like.
Right.
So now it's taking your input as I have a complex roof and it's using the satellite photo and all that kind of stuff. And it's giving you a more accurate estimate up front. So that looks like a price increase, but it's not. It's just, I think, being more accurate to what it actually is when they install it. That's my theory. But don't hold me to it.
I gotta say, I think you're right. I think that's spot on. I did a video. I talked to an installer in Texas, and he said the same thing. And I think we've actually seen their website iterate already once. What he mentioned was early on, they took the floor, the square footage of your house. So I have 1,000 square foot house. Well, is that 1,000 square? I have 2,000 square foot house. Is it 2-story? Is it 1-story? Like they didn't factor any of that. So I think the next iteration they started to do was like roof footage, if you will. But there's still way more complexity, like the pitch of your roof. They weren't accounting for like, the greater the pitch, the more the surface area, because that length of the hypotenuse increases. So there's a lot of little things that go into it. This is probably a good move because and I'm sure Weddle & Sons probably had the same feedback, which is customers were like, wait, you're more expensive than what Tesla's quoting me. And then how do you tell them, like, well, why don't you want to go follow through and you'll see we're probably going to be closer together. So this is something I think accuracy up front is really nice because they do a good job, I think, with their other solar products. Mm-hmm. If you want small, medium, large, you pick what you want and they get you pretty close to where you're going to be. This is such a wildly new product. I think you're right. I think that's a good.
Eric said that same thing to me, which was he was getting complaints from people saying, "What you priced it was going to be 55,000, but Tesla says it's going to be 32." He's like, "Yeah, right. What are you going to do?" And then it's like they go through Tesla and they're like, "Wait, it ended up being $50,000." It's because their estimates were far more accurate because they were actually going to the properties, looking at it, giving price quotes that way. So I just think they're being more accurate, that not actually raising prices.
Jim says, "Excuse me, did you just refer to the hypotenuse for the roof line?" So I mean, I'm just saying, like, the taller the pitch gets, the whatever you want to call this, it's the hypotenuse. Come on, it gets bigger. So. And this is for you, Maddie. Ion says, may I suggest the Northfield Mountain Pump Storage, I guess it's Western Massachusetts, pumped hydro facility for your mat cave. It appears on the outside as peacefully wilderness, but it's actually an energy storage facility.
I had no idea.
There you go. Wendell asked thoughts on on Volkswagen's investment in QuantumScape. That investment happened a long time ago. As far as any new investment, I'm not aware of. But QuantumScape, I need more time to kind of chew on them a little bit. I think they're on the right track, but they're years away from anything commercially viable by their own admission. So unless I had a chance to meet with like their engineering team or leadership team or see their lab or some new information, I don't feel like I could add much more to the conversation than that.
I'm kind of in the same boat. Solid state batteries in general are further away than people think. They're coming, but there's still too much in the lab. There's not enough in actual production. And that gap between lab and production can be massive. So it's not going to be something that's going to be here in the next year or two. It's going to be longer than people think.
As a developer, this one is very exciting to me. I'm really glad. This is from Eric as well, Berndorf, who is in tech. He says, do you guys care about augmented reality and virtual reality? And what do you think is coming from Apple in June? We're both Apple users. What do you think? They have their Worldwide Developer Conference coming up.
I'm really big into VR. I'm less bullish on AR because I just don't think the technology is there yet. Because to make AR really viable, like if you have glasses, it's like you don't want it to look like Google Glass or some kind of like weird, like I'm Geordie LaForge walking around. I think we're still years away from that happening, but I think they're going to announce a VR headset maybe for developers. Like, I don't know if it's going to be an actual product, but like I could see at the developer conference them announcing we're coming out with a VR headset and we want to give early access. Here's developer kits for people to start making games and things for it. I wouldn't be surprised if they do that.
Yeah, it's a very good point. There's times when I kind of feel like virtual reality is kind of like 3D TVs were a while ago. You know, we had all the headsets and it's either like an active shutter or like polarizers, and we had 3D TVs. I always knew that was not going to work. It was too much of a compromise. I remember we were watching a movie once and like one of our headsets died, and we were like, "Oh, guys, let's meet next week to finish this 3D movie. It'll be great. I'll have it all charged." It was bizarre. VR kind of feels that way. I might be totally wrong about that.
Do you have
AR
any?
doesn't have. What's that?
Do you have any VR headsets?
Our editor in chief Juan has a little I forget the name of the brand. It's I think it's Oculus Rift, or whatever that one is. And he loves it. He plays every night. He plays like these little games that are almost like fitness aerobics kind of things, and he loves it. So I mean, he would disagree with me on that one for sure.
Yeah, I disagree with you. I have 3. So
really?
like, yes.
You guys need to hook up and let him know which one he should get next, because this was actually gifted to us, and I don't know if it's that good or not, if there's better stuff out there. But AR could be like your phone looking into the world. It could be
True.
Like a projection on your screen in your car. Imagine you're driving and like AR stuff showed up, kind of like a Minority Report or something like that. And
yeah.
So there's very good question though. I'm dying to know if he's asking, do we think we'll see Apple glasses? I don't think so.
Those are still years away. Apple glasses, but a VR headset, maybe. Oh man, it's 9:00. It's that time.
Look at that. And we hit 148 likes, which is pretty good. Pretty good.
Not as good as last week. Not as good as last week.
Not as good as last week, guys. It's not too late though. Even after we start wrapping this up.
Keep hitting that like
button.
But
thank you again for all of you guys who keep tuning in. We love all of you. 20 videos in. This has been a fun experiment, and I'm glad we're doing this. And 5,000 subscribers. Let's go.
Yeah.
We'll see you guys next week.
Yep. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next week. 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, every Thursday night. And check out viceversa.show for the audio podcast. See you then. Bye-bye.